Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome here to another episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be working on a beautiful zucchini bread which we're going to be making right here. Without further ado, I'll introduce you to some of the ingredients I'm working with today. So I've got some all-purpose flour, about a cup and a half. Reserve a half a cup for dusting. I've got about a cup and a half of chopped zucchini. I've got some eggs, 2 eggs broken here. I've got some salt. I've got some olive oil, I've got some brown sugar, I've got some vanilla essence, some cinnamon powder, some bicarbonate of soda, some baking powder, and some salt. We're just going to take a small short commercial break. You can grab your pens and papers, and when you come back, we're just going to go straight into the cooking process. See you in a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to Dinner Guide today. We're going to be making a very beautiful dish today. We're going to be making some homemade bread. I'll just recap on for those who missed out. We're using some zucchini, we've got some brown sugar, some oil, we've got some salt, we've got some eggs, some all-purpose flour, some bicarbonate of soda, some cinnamon, some vanilla, and some baking powder. So without further ado, we're just going to go straight into the mixing process of this. And what I always recommend, always start with your dry ingredients, and I always insist, please have a sieve when you do so. So this is just to make sure you don't have any impurities in your flour or any foreign bodies that may have been in your flour that you have not seen with your naked eye. So it's always safer to just put them through a sieve. All right. And to that, I'm gonna add some salt, I'm gonna add some baking powder, and I'm gonna add some bicarbonate of soda, and lastly, some cinnamon powder. So give that a small pat by the side of your hand, and that is done now. That's complete. And then now for the second part, we're gonna be mixing our wet ingredients together. So I'm going to start with my eggs. Just straight into a bowl. And my brown sugar, so that's about 3/4 cup brown sugar. You can alternatively use white sugar as well for the same recipe. So I'm just going to give that a nice quick whip. Right, so to that I'm going to add my vanilla essence, about 2 teaspoons, and I'm gonna add half a cup of oil. Just regular cooking oil. I'm just gonna give that a mix again. This is just to make sure you incorporate all your ingredients together. Alright, so that's got a nice, beautiful texture to it. Now to this, we're just going to now incorporate our dry and our wet ingredients together, and I'll show you how that's done. So we're going to add the zucchini at this stage because we need to first of all coat it with a bit of flour. This enables you to make sure that the zucchini itself doesn't sink to the bottom of the baking tray while you're baking. So the beauty of it is once you coat a bit of anything that you add into a cake mixture or a bread mixture, once you give it a bit of dusting on the top, it actually allows it to lose a bit of surface tension, and it also manages to extract most of the liquid that's in there. So I'm just going to add that all into a bowl, and we're just going to give that a mix. So remember, the zucchinis I'm using are totally raw. I used the back sides of the outer side layer of the zucchini, so there's an inner layer that's really soft. Try and avoid that because it carries a lot of water, and second of all, it actually just doesn't appeal really well when it's cooked. It actually becomes very mushy. Right, so Just give that a mix. I always insist, always mix in the same direction continuously. Just this actually allows you to maintain stability, and it also just gives you a constant texture as well as feel with your bowl. And again, this allows you to also get everything incorporated really well. So always try to work with the same method you start with from the beginning. Right, so to that we're going to add our wet ingredients now. So in the bowl here, for those who are just joining in, I've got some vanilla, I've got some eggs, some brown sugar, and some oil. So I'm just going to add that to my bowl. And be sure to scoop out all the liquid that's in there. Always take a bit of time to make sure you don't waste it all. Remember, with baking is a more precise method of cooking, so you want to make sure that you follow the recipe to the letter. Right, so I'm just going to use my whisk now, and I'm just going to mix this through. So it should actually be a nice mixture as well. It should not be too runny, otherwise you'll have everything sinking to the bottom. So it should have a bit of a rough feel to the hand while you're mixing, but be sure to change to a different kind of spoon at this stage. I'm just going to shake off the excess from my whisk, and I'm just going to use a flat spoon. So very beautiful aromas coming through there. It actually starts to resemble a chocolate cake mixture. Right, so I'm just going to go around the bowl once more. And always make sure to actually be careful not to miss out on the little bits of flour that stick to the bottom of your bowl in the beginning. Be sure to always just move your mixture around a couple of times to make sure it's definitely mixed through right around. Right, you can give that a taste. Beautiful texture, beautiful feel. It's just enough vanilla in there to mask the taste of the vinegar, to mask the taste of the veggies. The egg really gives it a bit of richness as well. Alright, so now this is ready to go. Now all we are going to do now is I'm going to show you a little bit of technique of how to lay your baking tray just before this goes in. So basically I'm using a glass-proof dish. So this is very much safe to put in your oven. It won't crack. It's guaranteed to be able to hold high heat. And what we did is we basically brushed the inside with a bit of cold butter, just softened butter. And then I laid it with a bit of some parchment paper. So as you can see, it's a very, very thin brown sheet that you actually use when you're baking. And this allows for the cake to not actually stick to the tin, and it actually allows you to take it off really easily when it's done. So I greased it on the inside of the bowl, and then I laid out the grease-proof paper, greased the inside as well of that, and then dusted with a bit of flour. But just to be sure, we're just going to dust a little more in there. Alright, so just be gentle with the flour. And what you do is, once you've given that a nice dusting, just move your flour around the bowl. It's just to make sure all of it, as much as you can, will remain in the bowl, and the excess will actually just run out. So what I do is I just give the bowl a bit of a pat on the bottom there, and I just knock it on my counter table. That's the easiest way to get the excess out, and you can be able to clean this afterwards. Right, so all we're going to do now is add this mixture into the bowl, and what we're going to do is we normally pour right in the center of the bowl. This allows the mixture to spread evenly, and you actually have an idea that the mixture is gonna spread out on its own. That way you don't have to really force it to get to the sides of your bowl. So we're just going to grab this, and we're gonna pour it right in the center of the bowl. And as I said, just hold your bowl firmly on top and allow the mixture to just go straight into the pan. and just use your spoon to just scoop the excess off. Right, we're just going to get the last bits on the sides here. So be sure to take your time to scoop out as much as you can. Remember, it's not about how fast you can bake, it's about how precise you can be. And you really don't want to be pouring any of your mixture in the sink while you're doing your dishes. You want everything to be in the pan as much as you actually can get in there. So as you can see, nice, beautiful, clean bowl. I like to work with glass bowls because you can actually manage to see most of the ingredients. You can be able to depict anything that's foreign in there, especially if it's something that was in your flour. And the beauty of it is you can be able to see right through, and you can be able to detect how much waste you've actually tried to minimize. So what we're going to do is this, we're just gonna give it a bit of a shake. This is just to make sure the mixture spreads around evenly. And all we're going to do now is we're gonna set our oven. Our oven is already preheated. So I'm using the top and bottom element, and I'm going to set that. This was initially at 220. So I'm going to drop it to about 180 to 185. And this can go right inside. So this is gonna go right in the center rack here. Right, so we're gonna set our timer for 20 minutes, between 20 and 25 minutes. That should give it enough time to cook through. And then we're gonna jump into a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're gonna check on this just before it comes out of the oven. I'm also gonna give you a few pointers of what to check for, especially when you're baking, places to check on, especially if you're trying to make sure it's cooked through just before it comes out of the oven. And we'll just go straight into the plating, and you'll be able to see what we come up with much later. So don't touch that dial. We'll see you in a short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We were on a short break, and just before that we had put our vanilla cake inside the oven. Our vanilla cake, which has some zucchini in it. And now we're just about to take it out. It's about done. So we're just going to pull this out. And as I mentioned earlier, always these points to make sure you have at hand. Always have a cooling rack right next to you just before you take anything out. This allows it to cool a little faster. So I'm just going to grab that. And we're gonna move it to our rack here. Right, ladies and gentlemen, so this is now perfectly cooked. It's just about ready to eat as it is, but we're gonna give that a little bit of time to cool off. So before we take this out, we're going to give it a few minutes to cool off first. Points to take care of is never try and pull a cake out of the container before it cools off properly. So always give it a bit of time to cool off. Second of all, always try to let it cool off on its own. Never try and throw it in the fridge because it will change its characteristics. First of all, the fridge is a little more humid, so it will absorb all the humidity. So try and avoid rushing a cake when it's actually trying to cool off. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a very, very short break as we let this cool off. And when we come back, I'm going to show you some techniques of how best to plate it. So we're going to see you after a short bit. See you in a short while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The cake is now cooled off. It's just about ready to take off the grease proof. So as you can see, it's managed to hold its shape really well. It's still holding on to that grease proof paper just like we were planning it to do. So remember, this always comes handy, first of all, because I'll show you for a fact, if you hold the two adjacent corners of your baking dish and you pull it out, it actually lifts really well. So it does really help you at the end. It does really help you to get it out. And I'll show you from the baking dish we have. So you can be able to see that the baking dish comes out very clean. There is barely any stains on it, and the mixture actually held inside the greaseproof paper. So this is now about ready to serve. So I'm just going to show you some few techniques of how to get this onto your plate. And we'll start by loosening this greaseproof paper. So I'm just going to use the aid of my knife to make sure it doesn't break apart. Right, so always be sure to really be careful when pulling off your greaseproof. There might be edges that didn't really manage to not stick to the paper, and they might actually break the cake apart. So always have something, maybe a palette knife or maybe just a regular knife. As I mentioned, don't put your hands in there, because first of all, you might contaminate and you might put some germs on it. So it's always advisable to work with tools, especially with cake, because they do get the scent of anything that comes close to them. Right, so I'm just going to show you some very few techniques of how to plate this, and I'll start by just taking a nice slice off one of the sides here. Alright, so we're just going to break that open. Right, so basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this off with some icing sugar, which I'm about to show you how to do that. So we're going to be garnishing with some icing sugar and some shaved chocolate. Remember, you're not really held against your will to decorate it or plate it as we're doing it. We're just doing it for display purpose. So I'll recommend, if you do have any other techniques and you do have some fancy ways to do it better, I always insist, please do it that way. So I'm just going to lift this off the board here and move it onto the plate. So as you can be able to see, nice beautiful colors coming through there from the zucchini. The nice rich brown color from the brown sugar and the vanilla essence just gives it that really good aroma. So now all I'm going to do is I have some icing sugar here, which I'm just about to show you how to dust. So I'll always just hold a sieve right on top, and I'm just going to pour it over really slowly so that I only get the fine bits going on top. So simple as that. Give it a bit of a shake. Right, and now we're just going to move that onto our plate. Just gonna leave that there, and all I'm going to do now is finish it off with a bit of chocolate shavings. Alright, and that is now finally done. This is very presentable to your guests as it is right now. And for this remaining piece here, we're just going to lift this off the grease-proof paper, and we're just going to allow it to sit on our big display plate on the side here. So remember, most of the things that we're using are they're things that you can actually be able to acquire really easily. You can get most of this in your regular outlets or your regular supermarkets. So do feel free to actually try this for yourselves at home. Right, so that's about it. So from my end, it's been a pleasure showing you how to make this beautiful zucchini cake, and I hope you're all going to try and come up with a different technique on your own. It's been a pleasure hosting the show today. You've been tuned in to Dinner Guide. I'm Chef Andy. It's been a pleasure being with you today. So from the studios and myself, have a lovely night.